As we go through life, challenges and obstacles are inevitable, but we can't avoid them, but we can overcome them. And every step we take towards our goals, every box that we check, every ticket that we punch gets us closer to where we want to be. That's why I started this podcast, to share my journey of growth and to help others realize that they're not alone in theirs. No matter where you are in life, there's always another ticket to collect. Today, we're diving into why starting something new often feels harder than finishing it, and how pushing past that resistance can transform your life. Welcome to the Tickets Towards Success podcast. I'm your host, Tucker Nunnikoven, and here we discuss health and fitness, personal development, and personal finance topics. In this first episode, I'm going to introduce myself, explain the vision behind this podcast, and explore why the hardest part of achieving success often is simply taking action and just getting started. As for the podcast structure, I plan for each episode, I will give you personal updates of what I'm working on and what I'm learning to keep things relatable. Then we'll dive deep into a main topic, often with actionable takeaways and guest insights in future episodes. So about me and my journey. Fitness, I've always been an athlete of some sort. All throughout high school was an athlete, played baseball in college. I've been weightlifting and doing hybrid athlete training for about just over a year now. Then been training for marathons, half marathons, working on weightlifting goals, and exploring how fitness really fuels your everyday life. As for business or career, from building my career, I'm a sales manager at a hotel here in my area. To starting this podcast, I've learned a lot about taking risks and growing along the way. In life, like many of you, I've faced moments of uncertainty. This podcast is my way of sharing what's worked for me and helping others realize they're not alone. So I have 3 goals for this podcast. Number 1 is to build a strong community of passionate individuals, of like-minded individuals. Number 2 is to share my story and connect with those like-minded individuals, to connect with listeners that may be going through similar struggles. Number 3 is I hope to bring on guests on the show and share diverse perspectives and learn together. Briefly, I want to just talk about the meaning behind the podcast name, Tickets Towards Success. There is a very light meaning and then there's a very deep meaning. So my name being Tucker, my nickname growing up was Ticket. The way I got this is when you would punch my name into a phone, it would actually autocorrect to Ticket. So my friends, my family all started calling me that, and I guess that it just kind of stuck. But the deeper meaning here is about collecting tickets in your life towards success. So imagine that you're collecting punches on a ticket, right? So the way I think about this is you get 10 punches, you get like a free pizza or something like that. I'm sure that everyone listening has maybe had that in their life. So think of like a ticket like that, or think of you're at an arcade and you're playing these games and you're collecting tickets to ultimately get that prize at the end of the day. So every goal that you set, big or small, represents another step closer to something meaningful. Whether it's fitness, career, or personal growth, each ticket you punch adds up. For some examples, training for a marathon, right? You're collecting tickets through that entire prep, and then the ultimate prize is the race itself. Or advancing in your career, you're building your stepping stones in your career to get to where you want to go. And it even works in everyday life with building relationships, whether that's with your friends, your coworkers, or a significant other. You have to take and collect tickets along the way to better that relationship, to put it and get it where you want it to be. So let's dive into the main topic: why starting is harder than finishing. I actually thought of this topic during one of my morning runs. For any of you listening that are runners, or maybe you're not, for me, when I'm on my runs, I get a lot of clarity. I get a lot of time to just think about my life, about where I want my life to go, some of the successes that I've had and some of the failures that I've had, and how I can learn from those things. So when I was thinking one day, and I'm thinking about this topic, and it didn't really make a lot of sense to me at first. But then I started thinking about my life and some of the things that I've accomplished, or some of the things that I've done, and it's a very, very accurate statement. And the problem is when I was thinking about that, I think that it's preached backwards in society. We always make up for the ending being the hardest part. And the best example I can get is in school. You study for a test, and then it still seems like the hardest part is taking that test. You're still very, very nervous. You're still almost struggling during that test. At least that's how I felt during some of those tests. And I think it should be the opposite, right? I think putting in all those hours of studying, that's the hardest part, is being disciplined enough to actually study for that test. And the easy part is knowing and showing up and knowing that you put in the work, you know exactly what you need to know, and all you got to do is take the test. And the same applies in life every single day. And another example is just for running, for a marathon, half marathon, 5K, whatever you're training for, the hardest part is that training block. And then all you got to do is show up to race day. Yeah, you're still going to be nervous. But if you know deep in your heart that you put in a ton of work, you'll be just fine. So why does this topic matter? The only way to improve who you are and where you are in your life is to take action. It doesn't matter if it's a simple daily task or a business that you're trying to start. That's the first reason why it matters. Number two is understanding that this can change your perspective on procrastination and discipline. Knowing that in the beginning, you're going to have to be very disciplined because you're going to want to procrastinate. You're going to think of all the excuses possible to not start. But then when you start getting into it and building momentum, you're going to be just fine. So some areas of life that this really applies to. There's everyday tasks, health and fitness, career, and personal growth. Those are four of obviously the biggest ones that really sum up everyone's lives. So everyday tasks: unloading the dishwasher, cleaning your living space, or meal prepping. Nobody wants to do those things unless you have a spurt of energy where you just feel like doing it. But I can tell you that 99% of people don't want to do it. But once you start doing unloading the dishwasher, it'll take you 5 minutes, right? The hardest part is just getting yourself to do it. For health and fitness, starting a workout routine, running or weightlifting. For your career or business, it could be tackling big projects, applying for new jobs, or launching a side hustle, or going after something that you've always wanted to start or get into. Personal growth could be investing in relationships or stepping out of your comfort zone. It's funny how even the smallest task can feel daunting at first. Think about unloading the dishwasher. You don't want to do it, but once you grab that first plate, you're done in minutes. The same goes for a morning run. You dread tying your shoes, but once you're out the door, it feels great. These little moments remind us that the hardest part is starting. And it's not just about chores. It applies to bigger things too, like fitness, relationships, or building a career. Starting creates momentum, and momentum is everything. That little spark can light a whole fire. And that is what you need to do. You need to start and build momentum. Some personal examples from my life and what I've gone through so far. And I do want to just clarify that I am no one special. I'm a regular, average guy that works a 9 to 5, and I'm just trying to find my way through life and share my journey, connect with others, build relationships, and find my overall purpose in life. So some personal examples for me for fitness would be training for a half marathon. And it taught me that the value of showing up, even on tough days. Starting my half marathon training was a lot harder than the race, than finishing the race. There's 12 weeks in that program, in that training prep. And there was so many days, and I'm not going to sit here and say I was perfect every single day, because I wasn't. I did miss a few days. But it taught me how important it is to show up every day. Make sure you're fueling correctly. Make sure you're eating right. Make sure you're stretching and doing mobility. Make sure you're taking care of your body. And number 2, for health, staying consistent with whole foods. And I also gave up alcohol for 8 months. So starting with whole foods, just cutting out a lot of processed stuff, it was like 2.5 years ago, was definitely a struggle, because, you want to eat those things, and it's easier to do those things because you don't have to cook as much. You can just heat things up. But now I'm in a process of, meal prepping, making sure that I'm eating clean, reading ingredients, making sure that I'm getting the right amount of, protein, carbs, and fats that I need, to sustain my fitness. And then starting for giving up alcohol was tough. But towards the later months, halfway through, I didn't even think about it. Number 3, financially. Shifting from spending to investing and seeing long-term growth. And I like this to be considered the power of delayed gratification. It was very hard. I'm a big spender. I like to spend money. I like to buy things, and I know that can be not the best. But I was able to do that. I was able to switch my mindset from spending to investing and making sure I have everything, all my investments in order. And that was tough. That was really tough for me. It was probably one of the hardest ones for me to really change my mindset on. And I think it can be probably for a lot of people. Number 4, career and business. Starting this podcast was a huge leap for me. I was sitting here thinking, I've been sitting here thinking, what if it doesn't work? What if no one listens? What if I mess up? But I know that if I let those thoughts stop me, I'd never even get the chance to try. And there's a powerful quote that I hear Nick Bear say a lot. One of the guys that I follow for fitness and content. He says that doubt is only powerful when you believe it yourself. There's always going to be people that doubt you, and no matter what you do, it does not matter what you do, there will always be people that doubt you. The only thing that matters is if you doubt yourself and if you believe that. So that's what you have to make sure that does not happen. And I actually have another quote on my whiteboard over here that says, if you don't start, you'll never figure out what the outcome could be. If you don't start something, you're never going to know what could happen. It might fail. That's okay. You definitely learn some things along the way. That's why you have to start. But even if you finish and it failed, you learned a lot and you can take that on to your next venture. For a key takeaway for this main topic, it's harder to start than it is to finish. And that's the truth most people don't talk about. The beginning is where fear and doubt creep in, right? Just like we talked about. You just cannot let yourself doubt yourself. And we overthink. What if it doesn't work? What if I fail? But here's the thing. Once you take that first step, that first leap, momentum kicks in. And suddenly, what seemed impossible doesn't feel so hard anymore. Starting anything, whether it's a new fitness routine, a career move, or just doing the dishes, is the hardest part. But if you can push through that, you're already halfway there. So I have 3 quotes here from 3 well-known people that I want to share that really relates back to the topic why starting is harder than finishing. The first one is from Mark Twain. I'm assuming that most people know who Mark Twain is, iconic American writer. And he said, the secret of getting ahead is getting started. The only way to get ahead is to get started. The second from John Galsworthy, English novelist and playwright. Beginnings are always messy. And this is very short and simple, right? And what I get from this is you don't know what you're doing. I have no idea what I'm doing for this podcast. There's a lot of unknown things that I still have to figure out. A lot of things that I still have to learn. And it's going to be messy in the beginning. But I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow, and I'm going to figure that out. And that applies for everything in life. If you don't know how to work out, it's going to be messy. You're going to feel like you don't know what you're doing. But that's okay, because you'll get to that point where you do know what you're doing. Number 3 is from, forgive me if I butcher this, Lao Tzu's, the author of The Art of War. For anyone that may have read that book, he said the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. It's a really great book. It's a really great quote. And for those of you that haven't read the book is about strategies taken from a Chinese war general. And it talks about how to beat your competition, how to strategically beat your competition. And the book is actually required by a lot of Fortune 500 companies out there as a mandatory read for their employees. So it's a great book. I highly recommend it. And I also just want you to remember that quote if you do read it. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. All right, I want to talk about what does starting mean to me. To me, starting is showing up. Even when it's inconvenient, no matter what happens, you are showing up. Whether it's the first step of a fitness plan or launching a business idea, the act of beginning is a commitment to your future self. And again, nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. I struggle every day with this one. This is probably one of the ones that I struggle with the most, is consistently showing up day after day after day, because it is tough. And you have to learn how to do it, and you have to shift your mindset into doing that. And just kind of an example here could be the first day of a training prep, the first workout of the day, or first starting a podcast script, writing your first podcast script, or maybe even your 9 a.m. at your 9 to 5. For me, sitting down and writing a podcast script, staring at a blank piece of paper, having no idea what I'm doing, don't even know how to structure anything, that was hard. As I got going, as I built momentum through this first script, I started to get a little bit of a flow. Once I started learning, from different platforms about how to write podcast scripts and kind of how to structure them, I built that momentum and it got a little bit easier. So a key message for this podcast, for this first podcast: there will always be tasks or responsibilities you'd rather avoid. It's going to be every single day that those come up. But as I've said throughout this episode, starting is the key to growth. Every ticket that you punch, every ticket that you collect throughout your life adds up to a life filled with purpose and achievement. Starting is tough. I won't sugarcoat that. I don't think anyone will. It's uncomfortable, it's scary, and it challenges us. But if we don't start, we risk something even worse: staying stuck. Every time we take on the hard things, we grow, learn, and get closer to the version of ourselves we're striving to be. That's what collecting tickets towards success is all about. That is what this podcast is all about. Every ticket punched is a lesson learned, a goal achieved, or a step forward. So keep pushing. No matter how small the step, it's still progress. So an actionable challenge for listeners, for anyone listening, I challenge you. Think of one task or goal that you've been putting off, and I want you to start it today. Right after you listen to this, right after you hear this, start it today. No matter how small the first step is, and reflect on how it feels once you've begun and after you finish. When you're in that process of doing that, reflect in your mind, reflect to yourself, how does this feel? And then when you get home or whatever you may be doing, I want you to take a journal or a piece of paper and write down how you felt after you got done. And I want you to remember that feeling every single time that there's a task or a goal that you're avoiding. I want to thank you for tuning into this first episode of the Tickets Towards Success podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you enjoyed the topic today. There is a lot of good topics coming out in the month of January, and I'm very excited to get that out to you guys. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my journey and why I believe that starting is harder than finishing. New episodes drop every single Monday, and next week we'll dive into how to achieve what matters most in your life and the power of goal setting. Follow me on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and bonus content. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or a comment with your thoughts and suggestions. I really appreciate that. And remember, every step forward grants you another ticket to achieving your goals. And the more that you collect, the more you'll learn and grow. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.